Chosen one, stop scrolling. This is about you. If you feel like your world has been shifting, like people are falling away and nothing feels the same anymore, this message was timed for this exact moment. This video is about why God is removing people from your life, and the one reason behind this divine separation that no one fully explained to you. You did not click here by accident. Out of all the noise, all the distractions, all the random content competing for your attention, this found you. That is not coincidence. That is alignment. Spiritual awakening is never random. It is initiated. It is orchestrated. It is divinely timed. You have felt it, haven't you? The shift, the distance, the quiet detachment growing inside you. People who once felt like home now feel unfamiliar. Conversations that once energized you now drain you. Places that once felt comfortable now feel restrictive. And you have been asking yourself, what is happening? Why does everything feel like it is being rearranged? Here is the truth. This video will uncover. God is clearing your life for alignment with your divine calling. This is about your assignment. This is about your protection. This is about why certain doors had to close so your purpose could breathe. Stay until the end, because what you are experiencing is not loss, it is preparation. And once you see it clearly, you will never interpret separation the same way again. This is not chaos, this is strategy. When divine separation begins, it rarely feels divine. It feels like rejection. It feels like abandonment. It feels like doors closing without explanation. It feels like being misunderstood, left out, talked about, or suddenly disconnected from people you thought would always be there. But what you are interpreting as loss is actually protection. What feels like abandonment is often redirection. What feels like isolation is preparation. Chosen one, your life is not casual. Your path is not random. When spiritual awakening begins, God's plan starts rearranging your environment before you even understand your assignment. There are people who cannot go where you are being sent, not because they are evil, not because you are superior, but because they are not aligned with your divine calling. And misalignment is expensive. It drains vision. It delays destiny. It contaminates clarity. You are not imagining the tension. You are not overthinking the distance. You are not being too sensitive. You are sensing divine alignment, recalibrating your world. When God begins to elevate you, He first begins to separate you. That separation is not punishment, it is positioning. The chosen one cannot carry everyone into their next level. The weight would crush them, the noise would confuse them, the doubt would weaken them. There is a reason you have felt uncomfortable where you once felt secure. There is a reason certain relationships have begun to dissolve without dramatic conflict. There is a reason you feel called to something bigger, even if you cannot yet explain it. That calling requires space. It requires clarity. It requires protection, and sometimes protection looks like removal. God's plan is not sentimental, it is strategic. When He begins divine separation, He is not trying to hurt you, He is trying to preserve you. There are conversations that would have diluted your courage. There are attachments that would have softened your conviction. There are influences that would have redirected your focus, so He removed them. Chosen one. This is the moment where you must see clearly. You are not being rejected. You are being refined. You are not being abandoned. You are being aligned. Spiritual awakening often feels like loss before it feels like power, but the loss is intentional. The space being created in your life is not empty. It is sacred. If this resonates deep within you, if you feel that subtle confirmation in your spirit, comment 77 below, not as superstition, as agreement, as alignment, as a declaration that you recognize God's plan unfolding even when you do not fully understand it. Because here is the truth. Most people will never tell you when you are a chosen one. Your relationships are filtered by assignment. Your circle is filtered by calling. Your environment is filtered by destiny. God will not allow permanent access to anyone who threatens your divine calling. He will not negotiate your purpose to preserve your comfort. And yes, it can feel like war. It can feel like confusion. It can feel like everything is shifting at once. That is because it is. Spiritual awakening disrupts before it rebuilds. It shakes before it stabilizes. It removes before it replaces. So circle back to where we began. This is not random. This is not your imagination. This is God's message, reaching you at the exact moment you needed confirmation. You were called. The war you feel is real. The resistance you sense is real. But so is your assignment. So is your light. And your light is necessary. You were not being discarded. You were being repositioned. You were not losing people without reason. You were being aligned for your divine calling. God's plan is active in your life right now, even through separation. Now let me show you what is really happening behind the scenes. And if this touched your soul, if something inside you just stood up and said, "This is for me," comment 111, because you know it, you were called. Divine separation is not punishment, it is preparation of the stupendous of word. Chosen one, you must understand this clearly. Divine separation is not punishment, it is preparation. What feels like loss is often strategy. What feels like isolation is often elevation in disguise. There is a spiritual law that operates quietly but powerfully in the life of anyone walking through spiritual awakening. Before elevation comes isolation. Before you are expanded, you are extracted. Before you are promoted, you are positioned. Before you step into greater authority, you are separated from what cannot sustain that authority. This is not cruelty. This is precision. God's plan does not randomly remove people from your life. It repositions you so that your environment matches your assignment. Divine separation is not rejection, it is spiritual repositioning. When certain relationships fall away, when certain friendships dissolve, when certain connections suddenly grow distant, it is not always because something dramatic happened. Sometimes it is simply because you are no longer energetically aligned. Toxic relationship removal is often the first visible sign of spiritual awakening. Not because those individuals are evil, not because you are superior, but because the frequency has shifted. You are thinking differently. You are seeing differently. You are desiring depth where you once tolerated surface. Conversations that revolve around gossip now exhaust you. Drama that once entertained you now drains you. Validation that once satisfied you now feels empty. This is not arrogance. This is awakening. God's plan requires emotional detachment before destiny expansion. You cannot carry old attachments into new dimensions. You cannot step into your divine calling while emotionally anchored to environments that keep you small. Elevation demands lightness. It demands clarity. It demands the courage to let go. Think about what has already happened in your life. Perhaps you lost friends after growth, not because you fought, not because you betrayed each other, but because your evolution made them uncomfortable. The jokes changed, the ambitions changed, the tolerance for negativity changed, and slowly the connection weakened. That was not random, that was divine separation preparing you for a new level. Maybe you experienced a relationship breakup during spiritual awakening. A connection you thought would last forever suddenly unraveled, plans dissolved, promises faded, and you were left questioning everything. But as painful as it was, something inside you knew the relationship could not stretch where you were being stretched. It could not grow where you were being grown. Toxic relationship removal does not always look toxic at first. Sometimes it looks like heartbreak, but beneath it is protection. Perhaps even your family began misunderstanding your evolution. They called you distant. They said you had changed. They questioned your new boundaries, your new discipline, your new focus. And you felt alone in your own home, but growth often disrupts familiarity. Spiritual awakening does not ask for permission from comfort, it demands transformation. God removes who cannot go where you are being sent. Let that anchor itself in your spirit. It is not about worth, it is about alignment. Not everyone assigned to your past is qualified for your future. Not everyone who started with you is meant to finish with you. Divine separation is not cruelty, it is clarity. The isolation you feel is not abandonment, it is preparation for expansion. When you are alone, your discernment sharpens. When noise fades, your intuition strengthens. When distractions fall away, your vision becomes precise. Elevation requires solitude, because solitude builds authority, and authority requires alignment. This is why the war feels internal. Part of you misses what was familiar. Part of you wants to hold on to what felt safe. But your spirit knows safety is not the same as destiny. Comfort is not the same as calling. And God's plan is not centered on your temporary emotions. It is centered on your eternal assignment. Divine separation hurts because attachment resists change. But change is necessary for growth. Toxic relationship removal is not about condemning others. It is about preserving your energy. It is about protecting your clarity. It is about ensuring that your spiritual awakening is not diluted by environments that resist evolution. Chosen one, this is still a message from God. You are not imagining the shift. You are not overreacting. You were called. The discomfort is real, because the war is real. The tension is real, because the assignment is real. When light intensifies, shadows react. When purpose awakens, resistance increases. But that resistance confirms significance. Your light is necessary. That is why the preparation feels intense. That is why divine separation feels disruptive. Elevation requires space, and space requires removal. God's plan is refining your circle so that your calling can breathe. So stand firm in this truth. What left was not stolen, it was sifted. What ended was not wasted, it was repositioned. You are not behind, you are being prepared, and preparation always precedes promotion. You are not behind, you are being prepared, and preparation always precedes promotion. If this touched your soul, if you feel the fire of recognition rising inside you, comment 101 because you know it, you were called. But there is one deeper reason most people never understand. The one real reason God removes people, chosen one. Now we arrive at the core truth. The reason beneath the confusion, the explanation beneath the pain. The one real reason God removes people from your life is this: your divine calling cannot survive contamination. Read that again in your spirit. Your divine calling cannot survive contamination. When you are chosen, your life is not random, it is assigned. Your steps are ordered, your trials are measured, your connections are filtered. Nothing about your journey is casual. There is intention woven into your path, even when you cannot see it clearly. Some relationships are distractions. They consume time, attention, and emotional energy that should be invested into your growth. They keep you busy, but not progressing. They keep you entertained, but not expanding. You think you are moving, but you are circling. That is distraction. Some relationships are delays. They slow your obedience. They plant subtle doubt. They encourage comfort when you are being called to courage. They whisper, maybe later, when your spirit is hearing, now. Delay is dangerous because it feels harmless, but delay steals momentum. And some relationships are destiny blockers. They actively resist your evolution. They mock your vision. They question your discipline. They shrink your ambition to match their insecurity. They are uncomfortable when you shine too brightly. They prefer the version of you that was easier to control, easier to predict, easier to keep small. When you are a chosen one, you do not have the luxury of keeping what contaminates your clarity. Energy alignment matters. What surrounds you shapes you. What you tolerate trains you. What you repeatedly expose yourself to influences your decisions. Destiny requires protection because destiny carries impact, and impact attracts resistance. Your calling demands refinement. That means your environment must be refined. Your conversations must be refined. Your influences must be refined. Divine separation is not random emotional chaos, it is spiritual filtration. If they gossip constantly, they cannot stay. Gossip corrodes integrity. If they doubt every step you take, they cannot stay. Doubt spreads quietly and erodes confidence. If they manipulate your emotions to keep you accessible, they cannot stay. Manipulation distorts discernment. If they drain you, leaving you exhausted after every interaction, they cannot stay. Energy is currency for purpose. If they mock your vision, laugh at your discipline, or belittle your dreams, they cannot stay. This is not arrogance. This is assignment awareness. God's plan protects purpose by removing interference. You may not recognize the interference while you are emotionally attached to it, but heaven sees what you cannot. Heaven sees the conversations that would have discouraged you 6 months from now. Heaven sees the subtle resentment building beneath certain smiles. Heaven sees the patterns you are too loyal to confront. Divine separation is God stepping in where you hesitate. It is protection disguised as pain. It is intervention disguised as loss. You think you are losing people, but in reality, you are losing obstacles. Chosen one, contamination does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like comfort. Sometimes it looks like familiarity. Sometimes it looks like history. But history does not equal destiny. Shared memories do not equal shared mission. Longevity does not equal alignment. Your divine calling carries weight. It carries responsibility. It carries influence. If your light is meant to guide others, it must burn clearly. It cannot flicker because of surrounding winds. God's plan is not cruel when it separates you. It is careful. And yes, this is where pride tries to interfere. You may think you can manage both your calling and misaligned connections. You may believe you are strong enough to carry everyone with you, but even strength has limits. Even patience has thresholds. Even loyalty must bow to destiny. Divine separation becomes necessary when contamination threatens calling, when distraction threatens focus, when delay threatens obedience, when interference threatens impact. It is not about punishing them, it is about preserving you. Remember the beginning. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the shift. You are not exaggerating the tension. You were called, and when you are called, refinement follows. The war you feel is real, not always visible but real. There is a battle between comfort and calling, between attachment and assignment, between who you were and who you are becoming, and that battle intensifies when elevation is near. Your light is necessary. That is why the interference increases. That is why the misalignment becomes obvious. That is why certain connections grow uncomfortable. Light exposes what darkness prefers hidden, and exposure often triggers separation. God's plan is not removing people to empty your life. He is removing them to protect your future. He is clearing space so your divine calling can breathe without contamination. He is strengthening you so that when the next level arrives, you are not divided. So do not confuse loss with punishment. Do not confuse distance with abandonment. Divine separation is strategy. It is protection. It is refinement. It is alignment in action. Stand in this truth with courage. Accept that not everyone can remain. Accept that not everyone can understand. Accept that not everyone can align. And do not apologize for outgrowing what once fit. This is still a message from God. You were called. The war is real, but so is your assignment. So is your authority. So is your light. If this touched your soul, if something inside you recognizes this fire as truth, comment 111, because you know it. You were called. And here is where it begins to hurt. Why it feels so painful. Chosen one, this is where it becomes heavy. This is where the spiritual truth collides with human emotion. Because even when you understand that divine separation is protection, it still hurts. Even when you know God's plan is unfolding, your heart still grieves. Spiritual awakening is not a numb process. It is not robotic. It is not detached from feeling. It is deeply emotional because it is deeply transformative. Grief during spiritual awakening is real. You are not only grieving people, you are grieving versions of yourself. You are grieving what you thought your future would look like. You are grieving the comfort of familiarity. You are grieving routines, inside jokes, shared memories, and imagined tomorrows. That grief does not mean you were wrong. It means you were attached. And attachment is where the ego resists divine separation. The ego wants what feels safe. It wants what feels known. It wants validation, reassurance, and control. When relationships shift or dissolve, the ego interprets it as rejection. It whispers, "You are losing." It whispers, "You are not enough." It whispers, "Go back, fix it, chase it." But your spirit knows something deeper. Your spirit recognizes that not all endings are failures. Some endings are instructions. Some endings are alignments. Some endings are confirmations that you are stepping into a higher frequency. That is the internal conflict you feel. The heart wants comfort. The spirit wants destiny. Your heart remembers the laughter, the intimacy, the closeness. It longs for what was familiar. But your spirit feels the call forward. It feels the expansion. It feels the pull towards something bigger, even if it cannot yet describe it. And that tension creates pain, because growth stretches you between two realities at once. Loneliness often enters during this phase, and that loneliness can feel intense. Conversations grow quiet. Invitations decrease. Messages slow down. You find yourself sitting with your thoughts more than you ever have before. But what feels like isolation is often sacred initiation. Spiritual awakening frequently removes external noise so that internal clarity can develop. Isolation is a training ground for spiritual authority. Authority is not built in crowds. It is built in quiet. It is built in reflection. It is built when reflection. It is built when you are forced to stand without constant affirmation from others. In solitude, you confront your fears. In solitude, you hear God's message more clearly. In solitude, your identity separates from approval. The pain you feel is not evidence of abandonment. It is evidence of transformation. Transformation is uncomfortable because it dismantles what no longer fits. It stretches your perception. It challenges your attachments. It refines your priorities. Divine separation hurts because it is removing what you once leaned on, but it is also strengthening what is within you. Think about it. If nothing changed, you would not grow. If everyone stayed exactly as they were, you would remain in the same emotional patterns. If comfort was never disrupted, calling would never expand. Pain is often the doorway to elevation. You may cry. You may question. You may replay conversations in your mind, wondering what you could have done differently. But understand this clearly. Not all separations are your fault. Not all endings are your failure. Sometimes God's plan simply outgrows your current environment. The war feels internal because it is internal. Attachment battles assignment. Memory battles mission. Familiarity battles faith. But faith requires forward movement. Faith requires trust in what you cannot yet see. Spiritual awakening intensifies sensitivity. You feel everything more deeply. You notice shifts more quickly. You sense misalignment faster. That awareness can feel overwhelming, but it is sharpening you. It is preparing you. It is increasing discernment. Chosen one, return to the beginning of this message. This is not random. This is God's message, meeting you in the middle of your confusion. You are not imagining the distance. You are not exaggerating the pain. You are called, and calling always demands refinement. The war is real. Not always visible to others, but real within you. It is the war between who you were and who you are becoming. And becoming requires release. Becoming requires courage. Becoming requires the willingness to endure temporary loneliness for long-term alignment. Your light is necessary. That is why the process feels intense. That is why divine separation feels disruptive. Light cannot shine clearly if it is constantly dimmed by misalignment. So God allows the dimming influences to fade. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. You are not being abandoned. You are being initiated. The pain is proof that something is changing, and change is proof that movement is happening. Hold this truth with strength. Grieve if you must. Feel it fully. But do not mistake the discomfort for destruction. It is construction. It is preparation. It is the breaking of old containers so that new capacity can form. If this touched your soul, if your heart recognizes this as truth even through tears, comment 111 because you know it, you were called. But something powerful happens during this solitude. The hidden blessing in the removal. Chosen one. Now we shift, because after the grief, after the confusion, after the ache of divine separation, something unexpected begins to rise. There is a hidden blessing in the removal. At first you cannot see it. At first all you feel is absence. But slowly, quietly, power begins to return. When toxic relationship removal happens, clarity begins to grow, the mental fog starts to lift, decisions that once felt complicated become simple, you no longer second-guess every instinct, you no longer filter your vision through someone else's approval, the noise decreases, and in that quiet, your thoughts become sharper, you realize how much confusion was tied to constant emotional negotiation. Confidence begins to grow as well. Not loud confidence, not arrogance, but steady, grounded certainty. When you are no longer surrounded by subtle doubt or disguised criticism, you begin trusting yourself again. You begin trusting your timing, your boundaries, your direction. Spiritual awakening strengthens inner authority, and that authority was difficult to access while you were constantly adjusting yourself to maintain connections that were misaligned. Spiritual discernment deepens. You start noticing patterns you once ignored. You recognize manipulation faster. You feel shifts in energy almost immediately. Low-frequency environments become uncomfortable instead of entertaining. You no longer tolerate conversations that revolve around negativity, gossip, or limitation. What once felt normal now feels heavy. Silence sharpens intuition. When the constant exchange of opinions fades, you begin hearing your own inner voice more clearly. You begin hearing God's plan, whispering direction. Silence is not emptiness, it is calibration. In silence, your awareness expands. In silence, your sensitivity becomes strength instead of weakness. Emotional strength grows through solitude. You learn to sit with discomfort without collapsing. You learn to process feelings without seeking instant distraction. You learn that you can survive loneliness, and once you know you can survive it, it loses its power to intimidate you. That is growth. That is elevation. Here is a truth most people never admit. When certain people leave, your energy returns. The exhaustion you thought was normal begins to disappear. The heaviness you carried in your chest starts to lighten. You sleep better, you think clearer, you breathe deeper. It is not because you stopped caring, it is because you stopped compensating. Toxic relationship removal does not just remove people, it removes emotional labor, it removes constant tension, it removes subtle performance. You no longer have to shrink your dreams to avoid intimidating someone. You no longer have to dim your light to preserve someone else's comfort. Your spiritual awakening gives you permission to exist fully. This is not loss, this is upgrade. Divine separation is not subtraction without purpose. It is refinement, it is recollaboration, it is alignment with a higher standard. God's plan does not remove randomly, it removes strategically so that what remains can expand. You may look around and see fewer people, but what you do not see yet is the quality of what is coming. When space is created, alignment has room to enter. When interference is cleared, clarity strengthens. When distraction is removed, direction intensifies. Chosen one, the hidden blessing is this: you begin becoming yourself without apology, without constant explanation, without negotiation. You stop chasing approval. You stop defending boundaries. You stop trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. That freedom is powerful. Spiritual awakening heightens awareness of manipulation. You recognize when guilt is used to control you. You recognize when affection is conditional. You recognize when support is selective. And instead of confronting with anger, you simply detach with wisdom. That detachment is not coldness. It is maturity. Remember the beginning. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the shift. You are not exaggerating the distance. You are called, and calling requires strength. Calling requires clarity. Calling requires energy that is not constantly drained by misalignment. The war is real, but you are stronger than you were before. The very separation that felt painful is building capacity inside you. Your light is necessary. That is why refinement feels intense. That is why the process feels disruptive. Light cannot shine through clutter. It must shine through clarity. You are not empty. You are expanding. You are not isolated. You are upgrading. God's plan is not punishing you. It is positioning you. And as you stand in this new space, you begin to recognize something powerful. You are no longer afraid of losing what cannot align. You are no longer afraid of standing alone, because you are not alone. If this touched your soul, if you feel the strength rising where weakness once lived, comment one time, because you know it. You were called. And this is where your identity begins to change. Signs this is happening to you right now. Chosen one, if you have made it this far, there is a reason. Not curiosity, not entertainment, recognition. Something inside you is responding, because this is not random. This is confirmation. God's message does not interrupt your path without purpose. It aligns with what is already unfolding inside you. One of the first signs divine separation is happening is that you feel detached from old conversations. The same topics that once kept you engaged now feel repetitive. Gossip feels exhausting. Complaints feel heavy. Shallow talk feels like wasted energy. You find yourself silent in rooms where you once dominated discussion, not because you are shy, but because your spirit no longer resonates with the frequency. You crave depth. You want meaning in your interactions. You want purpose in your time. You want conversations that stretch your mind and expand your understanding. Surface-level exchanges feel unsatisfying. You are not trying to be different. You simply are different now. Spiritual awakening rewires your appetite. What once fed you now feels empty. You begin to outgrow drama. Situations that once pulled you into emotional chaos no longer interest you. You observe instead of reacting. You withdraw instead of escalating. You realize how much energy drama consumes, and you are no longer willing to pay that price. This is not indifference. It is discernment. You lose interest in validation. Approval used to matter deeply. You wanted to be understood, praised, accepted, but something has shifted. Now you care more about alignment than applause. You would rather be authentic than admired. You would rather be at peace than popular. That shift is powerful. It is evidence of inner stability forming. And then there is the quiet but persistent feeling that you are called to something bigger. You cannot fully explain it. You cannot always describe it, but you feel it. It shows up as restlessness when you stay too comfortable. It shows up as dissatisfaction when you settle. It shows up as vision flashes that feel larger than your current reality. That feeling is not ego, it is assignment. These are not random personality changes. These are signs of a chosen one moving through spiritual awakening. When you are chosen, your desires evolve, your standards elevate, your tolerance decreases. Not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. Divine calling creates internal shifts before external confirmation appears. You may not yet see the full picture of where you are headed, but you feel the pull. You feel the separation. You feel the refinement. And sometimes that refinement feels lonely, but it is purposeful. If you notice that certain friendships feel forced, that certain environments feel draining, that certain habits feel misaligned. Pay attention. Your spirit is adjusting. Your frequency is recalibrating. Divine separation does not always begin with dramatic endings. Sometimes it begins with subtle discomfort, a growing sense that you no longer fit where you once felt secure. Chosen one, this is affirming, not dramatic. This is not about believing you are superior. It is about recognizing growth. Spiritual awakening is growth, and growth naturally creates distance between who you were and who you are becoming. You may notice that your schedule looks different. Your priorities shift. You invest more time in learning, reflecting, building. You guard your energy more carefully. You think before committing. You hesitate before opening your heart, not because you are closed, but because you are wise. And here is the most important truth. God's message is confirmation, not coincidence. You are not imagining these changes. You are not overanalyzing your detachment. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming clear. Return to the beginning of this message. This found you for a reason. You were called. The internal shifts are not accidents. The separation is not meaningless. The tension is not imaginary. The war between comfort and calling is real. Your light is necessary. That is why refinement feels intense. That is why spiritual awakening feels disruptive. When light increases, alignment becomes non-negotiable. You cannot carry old frequencies into new assignments. You are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself. You are not becoming isolated. You are becoming intentional. You are not confused. You are awakening. Stand in that truth with quiet strength. Let the signs confirm what your spirit already senses. Let the detachment affirm your evolution. Let the discomfort remind you that growth is active. If this touched your soul, if you recognize yourself in these signs, comment 111 because you know it. You were called. Now let me give you the wisdom most will never tell you. Do not chase what God removed. Chosen one, hear this clearly and without confusion. If God removed them, do not run after them. Do not text what heaven separated. Do not beg for what divine separation dismantled. Do not rebuild what God's plan deliberately tore down. This is not cruelty. This is correction. There is a reason the door closed. There is a reason the distance formed. There is a reason communication shifted. You may not have understood it at the time. You may have cried over it. You may have questioned yourself because of it. But if God allowed the removal, there was protection in it. The danger of reconnecting with what divine separation removed is not always immediate. At first it feels comforting. Familiar voices, familiar patterns, familiar energy. It feels like relief, but comfort can disguise regression. When you return to old energy, you restart old cycles. The growth you fought for becomes diluted. The clarity you gained becomes clouded. Toxic relationship removal is not just about people. It is about patterns. It is about dynamics that kept you small, distracted, or emotionally unstable. When you revisit those connections without transformation, you reopen access to the same confusion. You tell your spirit that loneliness scares you more than misalignment. Emotional impulse is powerful. When you miss someone, your heart romanticizes what was good and minimizes what was draining. You remember the laughter but forget the exhaustion. You remember the closeness but forget the compromise. That selective memory tempts you to chase what felt familiar instead of what is aligned. But trust in God's plan must be stronger than emotional impulse. Trust is not passive, it is active surrender. It is choosing not to interfere with what heaven already handled. It is resisting the urge to force reconnection simply because you feel uncomfortable in solitude. Spiritual maturity is trusting removal as much as arrival. It is celebrating the new doors without trying to reopen the old ones. It is believing that if something was meant to stay, it would not have been so easily disrupted. It is understanding that divine separation is not random heartbreak. It is strategic refinement. You cannot step into your divine calling while dragging expired connections behind you. Every level demands new alignment. Every elevation demands lighter weight. When you chase what was removed, you communicate doubt. You suggest that you do not fully trust the process, and doubt weakens progress. This does not mean you hate anyone. This does not mean you become bitter. It means you become disciplined. Discipline is protecting your peace even when nostalgia whispers. Discipline is choosing alignment over attachment. Return to the beginning. This is a message from God. You are not imagining the shift. You were called. The war is real because growth creates tension. But tension does not mean retreat. It means expansion. Your light is necessary. That is why boundaries must be firm. That is why separation must be respected. If your calling carries influence, it cannot be compromised by cycles you already outgrew. God's plan is not fragile, but your obedience matters. Stand in the confidence that what left was not stolen. It was sifted. What ended was not accidental. It was intentional. You are not alone in this process. You are guided. If this touched your soul, if you feel the firmness rising inside you, comment 101, because you know it. You were called. And here is the reward waiting on the other side. The new alignment that is coming. Chosen one. This is where hope becomes clarity, not fantasy, not exaggeration. Clarity. When God removes, He replaces. When God separates, He aligns. When God isolates, He prepares. Nothing in God's plan is wasted. Nothing in your spiritual awakening is accidental. The space you feel right now is not emptiness. It is preparation. The silence you are walking through is not abandonment. It is instruction. The separation you endured was not punishment. It was positioning. Divine calling requires divine alignment, and alignment cannot coexist with interference. You may not yet see the new connections forming. You may not yet recognize the doors quietly opening. But alignment is already in motion. When you release what was misaligned, you create room for what is assigned. That is how God's plan works. It clears before it builds. It refines before it reveals. This spiritual awakening is your preparation for your divine calling. Every tear strengthened discernment. Every lonely night deepened resilience. Every uncomfortable ending sharpened clarity. You are not who you were. You are stronger. You are steadier. You are more aware. Return to the beginning. This is a message from God. You were not scrolling randomly. You were not imagining the shift. You were called. The internal war you felt was confirmation of growth. The resistance you encountered was evidence of purpose. The separation you endured was protection. Your light is necessary. That is why refinement was required. That is why misalignment could not remain. Heaven protects what carries impact, and you carry impact. So stand tall in this truth. Expect alignment. Expect healthier connections. Expect environments that match your evolution. Expect peace that does not require performance. When God replaces, it will not feel forced. It will feel natural. It will feel right. If this message resonated with you and you feel aligned with God's plan, comment 77.7. Let it be your agreement with what is unfolding. And if this touched your soul, comment 11 because you know it. You were called. You were never being abandoned. You were being reassigned.